All right, first things first, this video is for Helix presets, meaning if you have the Helix Rack, the Helix Floor, the Helix LT, or Helix Native, this is for you. If you have an HX Stomp, a Stomp XL, or a Pod Go, you will want a different video. It is different patches, different sounds, different file protocols. Check the description for links to those videos. All right, amplifying your violin is kind of a double-edged sword. On one hand, it's really exciting because you've got all these possibilities, so many sounds and amps and effects pedals and all that. On the other hand, it's kind of terrifying and intimidating because there are a lot of options, amps, pedals, right? There are two basic ways to add effects to your violin. We can use stomp boxes, individual stomp boxes, or multi-effects pedals. Both are legit, and a lot of people, including myself, use both, but primarily I'm a multi-effects guy. I decided that for a number of reasons early in my career, and I started learning how to program these things to do what I want them to do. There is a little bit more pre-work necessary with these. You're not going to just buy a multi-effects pedal, take it to your gig, unbox it, plug it in, and start playing. There's kind of a learning curve first. I was a nerdy little kid. I started programming computers when I was about 8, so the programming doesn't bother me. And I figured since Line 6 makes it easy to share these file protocols back and forth, I could save you a bunch of time by making these presets available and kind of letting you take advantage of all the hours that I've spent kind of making sure what works for violin and what doesn't. So there is a pack of 10 presets that I think should give you a pretty good jumping off point for your Helix. You should be able to more or less install these, go to a gig, and play. Now there's a lot here, so you might want to spend some time deciding which ones you like and don't like, maybe making some adjustments to account for the difference between your playing style and mine, your instrument and mine, your specific circumstances of your gig, but these should be fairly universally useful right out of the box. If you want to buy these, it's $30. There's a link in the description for where to go to buy these. I don't know what your time is worth to you, but I figure these will probably save you several hours of frustration poking around on the Helix trying to figure out what works for violin and what doesn't. If that sounds like a good deal to you, then I guess we'll be in touch soon. If not, then hey, we can still be friends. When the payment hits my account, I'll get a notification and I will shoot you an email as fast as I can. Once you are a customer for life. If Line 6 can update their software every now and then for free, I figure I can update my presets every now and then for free. And I do that probably every 3 or 4 updates from Line 6. I'll take some of the new stuff in there and say, oh, I really like the way this works. I'm going to update my presets and I will just send those to you. Once you have bought this from me, I now have your email address. And when I make new presets, I will just send them to you. So make sure I'm not in your junk folder or whatever. All right, let's start with the main preset. It's called violin or cello. Even us weird guys who often want to sound like anything but a violin still need to sound like a violin sometimes, so this will be the place for that. In my previous preset packs, I had a separate preset for violin and cello. In this pack, I've combined them, adds a little more functionality, and makes it easier to switch back and forth between the two. All right, here's just the generic violin tone. Now let's click that octave down. And we can kick off that impulse response. Let's put on a little bit of delay to fatten this up some. Let's click on the chorus. Let's turn that extra reverb on. And let's hear a solo boost. This next one is a totally new concept for me, running an acoustic violin body IR in parallel with an amp model. In the past, I either looked at it as an either or, like either acoustic or electric, or I would sometimes run into a violin body IR and then into an amp model to kind of simulate what it would sound like if an acoustic electric violin plugged into an amp. One day I was listening to my IR sound and I liked the richness of it, but I felt like it was lacking some sparkle on the high end. And I was thinking, man, my clean amp sound, it's got plenty of sparkle on the high end, but it doesn't have a lot of richness. What if I ran those in parallel? So I got the richness from the IR, I got the sparkle from the amp, and that's exactly what I did here. It's roughly a 50-50 blend as it's programmed, but it's pretty easy to change that. Here's the violin Supro sound. Let's kick on some delay. And here's a couple of different drive sounds. And for fun, let's stack them. We can even throw in some wah. In my previous preset pack, what I'll call the legacy patches, there were 7 different presets that have now all been combined into one. The thing about switching from preset to preset in the Helix is that there's a short audio dropout as the computer's loading the new settings. But if you want to switch between blocks or snapshots within a preset, that's totally seamless. So I set this preset up to be used either in Stompbox mode, where you can stack and combine all these different effects, or you can use snapshot mode to toggle through using one at a time. Just a reminder, the top right button puts you into stomp mode, and clicking the left 2 at the same time puts you in snapshot mode. Right, so the first thing we're gonna do when we go to the mod effect is to put it in snapshot mode. This is the electric sound, kind of a Jean-Luc Ponty thing. And we can add a little delay to that. The next one's going to be a flanger sound. Then we can go to a phaser. And notice that we're switching seamlessly between these. Next one is an octave up synth. Got a growler. And a synth bass. The next three patches are very, very similar, almost exactly the same, and they're designed to give you three different levels of distortion. And the legacy patches, I think I named them something clever like blues, hair, and gent. I didn't do that this time. I guess maybe I'm not as creative as I used to be. But there are three different gain stages in each one of these that you can use either separately or together. They each have a wah programmed in, and I'm using a multi-band compressor instead of EQ. The reason I started doing that is when I'm playing my low strings, I want that sparkle, I want all that definition to come through, but when we're running up the neck on the E string, we start getting real screechy, I need some highs pulled out, right? So in EQ, you can either choose to have those highs in there or not in there. With a multi-band compressor, it will let them come through on the low notes, and it only pulls them down when they're kind of getting a little excessive. All right, on the Clarity amp, if you listen underneath for the undertones, you can hear just a little bit of saturation under. You can clean some of that up by backing your volume knob off. There's not a big change in volume, but you do get a little bit more clarity in there, a little bit more cleanliness. Now let's add a little bit of saturation to that. So that's just a little bit more warmth and a tiny bit more fuzz if you hear on the double stops. Not enough to sound distorted, but enough to add a little bit of that tube warmth that we like. Now here's a boost. So you hear it on the double stops, not so much on the single notes. You can hear it on the double stops, but just, a little bit of boost, not much. And now we're gonna throw some fuzz. This is gonna get nasty. Like that a lot, that's cool. Now we can add a little bit of phaser. This is gonna be a stereo phaser that just kind of fattens things out. And throw in some delay for fun. There's just a lot of sounds you can get out of this one preset here. The Lone Star amp is going to be kind of a low to medium gain amp, so let's hear with my volume wide open. You can hear those undertones underneath, but we can clean that up. Still just a tiny bit, but it really sounds like a violin. It just sounds like a violin with a little more, like some sunglasses on. It's cool. Let's go back, open on the volume. Add some saturation. just a little bit more warmth and attitude. Let's hear that boost. Now we're starting to get a little bit of dirt, a little bit of spunk to it. Now the fuzz. That's kind of fun. Let's stack these two. It's distorted, but it still sounds like a violin, and we can spread it out a little bit. All right, this Bogner model is dirty, and I mean dirty. And that's after I've starved the input by about 15 dB. But let's clean it up with about 15 more dB. Still sounds distorted, but it does sound like a violin. So you still get that Bogner kind of heaviness, but it's usable now. Add a little saturation. Some boost. It's got that nice heavy sound, but still crisp enough. The other thing we talked about is this dynamic EQ, or the multi-band compression. As we're down in the low notes, we're still getting plenty of that sparkle, but up top, it's not really stabbing you in the ear. Let me show you what that looks like on here. Let's look at these 3 gain reduction meters here. It's letting the highs all come through, but it's compressing a little bit of the lows. This Barbera pickup is super, super meaty. Some mids getting trimmed there. And then as we come up the neck, it's pulling out some of those highs so it's not so stabby in your eardrum. Now in our clean setting, let's kick on the fuzz. Giving us that nice kind of rich, fuzzy sound, but it's still intelligible. Dig that a lot. One of the most common effects that violinists like to use is reverb, for good reason. They sound great on violins. Helix has a bunch of fantastic reverbs, and this patch is set up to give you access to several of them with just the push of a button. Like with the ModFX patch, if you want to use one reverb at a time, Snapshot is probably the right mode for you. If you want to experiment with stacking and using different reverbs together, then probably Stompbox mode is where you want to be. Now in our reverb options, I'm going to show you what these snapshots are by clicking on those two. This is going to be our driest sound. We're going to add just a little bit of reverb in there. We'll call this dry-ish. Put us in a nice concert hall. Not that anybody would ever play those particular notes in that order. Now let's put a nice hall with some delay. Just kind of a nice fat sound. Now let's get to some of the more fun stuff. Here's the ethereal delay. You can hear there's a sub-octave in there. It's not in the dry sound, it's just in the reverb. Here's a sweep echo sound, which is technically a delay, but it's kind of verby. There's a shimmer reverb. Really fun. Now this is the more complicated one. This long wash, when you click that, it changes your volume pedal, your expression pedal, from an overall volume to just the dry sound in the mix. I'll rock it back. Now all we have is just the wet reverb. If you want to add some dry back in, you just rock that volume level up. Now there are some monophonic synth sounds that I developed for doing the Denon Zone electric violin concerto. It took a lot of time to dial these in, and I figured I would just share them with you, so here they are. They do get a little misbehavey if you try to play more than one note at a time. All right, these last two patches are essentially the same as the legacy patches. This pad violin sound is one I use a ton. It allows me to help fill in some space in a mix without necessarily sounding like a violin. One of the things that makes your violin playing sound more special and effective is if you give people a break from it once in a while. In a 4-chord pop tune, you're using 1, 4, 5, and 6 minor. Just quietly playing a drone on the 5 of the 1 chord is going to help fill out your band's sound. It works over all 4 of those chords, and it just kind of takes up a little bit of space and creates a sonic floor. People won't necessarily notice you playing, but if you stop, they'll be like, oh, something just went away. You can use that. Sometimes maybe if you lay out in the verses and then you put that drone in the chorus, it'll help create a little bit of separation between those two sections of the song. It'll help fill up some space, and it doesn't make people go, oh, he's still playing the violin. Now this PowerChord Bass sound is one I'll admit I have never used myself live, but a lot of people have said it's one of their favorite sounds, so I included it. It's got a pitch shifter on the top line that adds a fifth up or a fourth down if you pick that in the stomp box section, right? But let's hear that, and then it splits and put a bass sound in the bottom. I'm only playing one note here. Do with that what you will.